Welcome to the second episode of Celtic Wave, where we find out how local surfers resorted to making their own equipment and the development of the Irish Surfing Association. The cold waters made surfing in Ireland a chillier prospect than in other parts of the world, not helped by the lack of suitable equipment. This led some to become quite inventive.
You couldn't get surfing wetsuits, so you used diver suits, and sometimes you got in without a suit, anything to try and carry on the sport. So I know when we went to Rosnala on the surf ferry around the country, when we got to the beach, it was Easter Monday, and we drove down the beach and we got in, and there was 4 of us, and we had to share one wetsuit between us. One guy had the pants and a sweater, another had the top, the lucky one, and so on.
About 6 doors up there was Joe Mullen's fishing tackle shop. Joe, legend. But I went up there and got my first wetsuit, and it was one of those sort of diving suits, the rubber, and it's like you had to put talc on and pull it on up, and then you had a jacket, and then you had to put these things on the beavers and put it there, and you had these metal studs, and you'd be lying on your board, and it was uncomfortable, and you put dings in your board, and it was like almost surfing in a straitjacket, but it meant that we could go surfing and stay in the water.
Well, for the first 2 or 3 years, I didn't have a wetsuit, and I hadn't even thought about a wetsuit until I met Bo and Martin Lloyd and Alistair McCartney. Bo Vance and Martin brought in sheets. They found a source for sheets of plain neoprene. There's no lining; these are just plain sheets of neoprene, and we started to make our own wetsuits with various degrees of success. You learned very fast that you didn't have to make the cuffs too tight or the ankles too tight. Yeah, I remember Alan Duke made one, and his was a bit tight around the ankles and the cuffs. And I remember a particularly freezing cold day at Port Stewart Strand, and we'd managed to get out of our wetsuits and the towels around us in the van. And Alan, he was rolling about in the grass trying to get these things off his wrists and his ankles because they were very, very tight.
The challenges faced by these early surfers were not restricted to handmade wetsuits. At Trog's surf shop in Portrush, there is a huge choice of surfboards for all levels of experience. But in the early days of surfing in Ireland, the lack of locally sourced surfboards forced some to try out new methods of shaping, building surfboards from whatever materials they could get their hands on.
We worked from scaled up photographs in Surfer magazine to get the shape, right? We had no correct dimensions other than you got the length of the board from the picture in the book, or maybe a picture of a board with a person. So that gave you the length, and you took roughly the shape you saw in the magazine. Now, the thickness we had to work out for ourselves. So you shaped a polystyrene core, and then we tried to glass the polystyrene core. This is builder's type polystyrene. We tried to glass it. It wasn't a success because the polyester resin dissolved the polystyrene. So the whole thing shrank.
So these were heavily glassed, and I remember Bo actually standing with a surfboard under his arm one time talking to my mother, and the board slipped out of his arm in front of the house, and it came down on a stone on a rockery, right, and actually cracked the stone in half, and the board was completely undamaged.
After a while, we discovered epoxy resin, which changed the world. Actually, it did change the world. Now, what we didn't know was that we were ahead of the rest of the world, because nobody else was making epoxy boards in those days. They weren't doing it in the States, they weren't doing it in Australia. So if we'd realised what we'd found, we might have made our fortune. But it was all practice, a great deal of practice.
As the uptake of surfing increased throughout the 1960s, many believed that a governing body needed to be created to formalise the organising of events and enable surfers from Ireland to compete abroad.
When surfing started first, it was the Surf Club of Ireland, run from Dublin, that organised everything. And then within a year or two, surf clubs started up all over the place. We called ourselves the South Coast Surf Club. And then at the same time, Fastness Surf Club from Cork started up. There was the Clare Surf Club, which was called West Coast Surf Club, I think. The Sligo Surf Club. the Rosnowla Surf Club.
Because it was a sign now that the Surf Club of Ireland, which was our club, which covered all Ireland, was now breaking up. People in the different areas wanting to form their own clubs. So we knew now we needed an association. So we formed the Irish Surfing Association in Trinity College, in Brian Britton's quarters. He became, and Rocky Allen, the two of them are responsible for building the standard of surfing in Ireland and taking teams abroad.
Kevin Cavey, Harry Evans and Roger Steadman, they were the three that got surfing going out of Dublin, and they did all the organising at the start, and very quickly Brian Britton got involved and he did Trojan work as far as organising contests were concerned, and similarly Rocky Allen.
Brian and I started to share the presidency and the chairmanship of the ISA for, it must have been about 20 years, certainly 15. We were extremely lucky then we got Zoe, who's still running the whole show. Without her, there might never been an ISA or today. She has been the linchpin in the whole thing, really. Brian and I running around behind, coming up with silly ideas.
Very much like it's all the grassroots stuff, the surf clubs, and certainly initially it was the surf clubs. There weren't any surf schools when I would have started working for Irish Surfing, and that, you know, sort of 2 or 3 years into the job, the whole surf school industry started to explode in Ireland. We went from pretty much no surf schools to, like, there are over 60 registered with us. Like, every beach that there's surf and it has a surf school.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe for more content. In the next episode, we find out how the Troubles impacted on surfers travelling to the Republic of Ireland and the friction between soul surfers and competition surfers.
I suppose at that stage you were heading really into the deep troubles in the early 70s and stuff, and so it was so refreshing to get over the border and get away from all the stuff that was going on here, being constantly stopped by the army and checkpoints, and as soon as you got across that border, the world was your oyster.